This simple fruit habit, after 60, can boost longevity more than most medications. Before we begin, let me ask you something personal. What if the thing that could help you live longer, really longer, wasn't in your medicine cabinet, but in your fridge? Not a pill, not a miracle cure. Just one simple habit involving fruit. It might sound small, even silly, but what happened to Elaine? Thompson, after trying it, changed everything, including what her doctor believed was possible after 60. And if you're over 60 yourself, this could be the quiet shift your body has been waiting for. Elaine had always been the strong one. As a nurse for nearly 35 years, she was the person people turned to when things fell apart. Stitches, broken bones, long nights by hospital beds. She didn't flinch in chaos. But when she retired at 64, something unexpected began to happen. Not outside, but inside, the quiet she had once longed for felt empty. The mornings stretched longer than they used to. There were no more alarms, no more scrubs, no more patients to care for. She lived alone in a cozy, craftsman-style home in a quiet Oregon town where every season painted the trees a new color. It was beautiful, safe, stable, and yet each day Elaine woke up feeling a little less like herself. It wasn't illness exactly. She still moved. Fine, still cooked, still did her daily crossword, but something had dulled. Her joints were stiffer. Her energy came in bursts, followed by long spells of fatigue. She was beginning to forget names she used to recall without effort. But worst of all, she didn't care as much. The spark, the one that had fueled her through 12-hour shifts and double calls, was flickering. Her medicine cabinet was full. A little pill for blood pressure, another for cholesterol, one for inflammation. A shelf of supplements she couldn't pronounce, but a neighbor had sworn by. Still nothing changed. Or rather, everything was changing, just not in the direction she wanted. The conflict wasn't just physical, psychological. Elaine had spent her whole life helping others live. Now she was slowly watching herself shrink into the background of her own story. Her adult children were busy with lives of their own. Friends had moved. A few had passed. The silence in the house was no longer restful. It was sharp. Then came the attic. On a gray Tuesday afternoon, Elaine decided to clean out a few old boxes. Part spring cleaning, part distraction. Up there beneath dust and the smell of cedar, she found a worn, leather-bound journal tied with ribbon. It was her mother's. Inside were clippings, handwritten notes, and food lists from decades ago, back when her mother Ruth had stubbornly insisted on eating to live instead of taking more pills. Ruth had lived to be 96. One page stood out. It was written in dark blue ink with bold, cursive underlining, one handful of fruit a day, nature's quiet medicine. Elaine smiled and rolled her eyes at first. Typical mom. But the longer she stared at the page, the more it stirred something. A memory, perhaps. A smell. The way her mother used to slice oranges before church. The way her hands always smelled faintly of kiwi. That night, as she made her dinner, salmon and brown rice, Elaine added half a sliced apple to her plate, just for fun. The next morning, she made it a rule. One bowl of fruit a day, no matter what. She started eat what was already in the fridge. Blueberries, apple slices, orange wedges. Simple, unremarkable, but hers. At first, she didn't expect much. She didn't even want to expect much. She just needed to feel like she was doing something. A quiet act of rebellion against the fading feeling. Each day, she'd sit by her kitchen window, sunlight, washing the table, and eat her little bowl of fruit, islands. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't scientific, but it was hers. And in a world that had slowly slipped beyond her control, that meant something. By the end of the first week, she wasn't feeling younger, but she was feeling present. And after months of drifting, that alone felt like a victory. She didn't know it yet, but this one act, this small bowl of color, was the first step in a transformation that would astonish even her physician. And the most surprising part, it had nothing to do with medicine. It's strange how some of the biggest changes in life don't begin with a bang. They begin with breakfast. Elaine had never thought much about fruit. She ate it when it was in front of her. At hospital luncheons, she'd grab a grape or two. But now, every morning, it was intentional. A choice. A ritual. And after just 10 days, she noticed something that caught her off guard. She was waking up before the alarm. Not because of pain or anxiety, but because her body wanted to. Her mornings had a rhythm again. She sliced her orange slowly, peeled her kiwi with care, a few blueberries, sometimes half a banana, no sugar, no syrup, just fresh fruit and warm light through the kitchen blinds. And although it was subtle, her body was listening. She walked a little easier now. Her joints still creaked, but they didn't bark. She started walking to the mailbox instead of driving down the long driveway. She called her daughter Meredith just to talk, not because anything was wrong. She even took a dusty book off the shelf and began reading again. But something else had shifted too, something deeper. Elaine was beginning to feel connected to her body again. For years, it had been like an old machine she was managing, keeping it oiled, keeping it from breaking down. But now, it felt like a companion, a living part of her, not just something she had, but something she was. Still, she didn't tell anyone, not yet, because part of her was afraid it wouldn't last, that this was just a fluke, a placebo. And truth be told, she wasn't entirely sure this little habit was doing anything magical. But it was something within her control. And at this age, control was a form of peace. Then came the moment that truly surprised her. 3 weeks in, Elaine walked past a mirror and paused, not for vanity, but because something looked softer, brighter. Her eyes didn't look as tired. Her skin had a kind of glow she hadn't seen in years. She leaned in. It wasn't youthful, not in the sense of age, but it was awake. And it made her nervous, because with progress comes fear. What if this hope was temporary? What if it faded like so many other things she'd been hopeful before, taking supplements, following fitness plans, going to group yoga classes she didn't enjoy? And they never lasted, because none of them felt like her. But this fruit thing, it wasn't a fad. It was quiet, gentle, ancient. And it reminded her of something her mother once said. The most powerful things in life are usually the most overlooked, like breath, like water, Like fruit, Elaine began to dig a little deeper. She pulled up articles on antioxidants, on fiber, on how kiwi supports digestion, and pomegranate supports blood flow. She wasn't trying to become an expert, but she wanted to understand why something so simple could feel so profound. That's when she found a phrase that made her pause. Polyphenols may extend cellular lifespan by reducing oxidative stress. She didn't need to know every scientific term, but she understood one thing clearly. The fruit she was eating was not just feeding her, it was protecting her, day by day, cell by cell. She started adding variety, strawberries, papaya, even trying frozen blueberries when the fresh ones ran out. Her body was no longer a mystery she had to fix. It was becoming a garden she could tend, and the fruit that was her daily watering. But just as Elaine was starting to feel strong again, just as she dared to feel in control, something happened that brought everything into question. A letter arrived from her doctor's office. It was just an envelope, cream-colored, no return address, standard paper stock. But when Elaine saw it sitting crookedly in her mailbox, a chill crept down her spine. She already knew what it was. She'd missed her last appointment, not out of fear, but because honestly, she'd felt so much better lately. She didn't think it mattered. But now, the letter felt heavy, as if all the progress she'd made might dissolve with just a few words typed in black ink. She sat at the kitchen table, fruit bowl untouched, hands trembling as she opened it. Elaine Thompson, lab results indicate increasing risk for type 2 diabetes. Recommend scheduling follow-up to discuss medication options. She froze. Everything inside her tightened. She read it again. Then again. How was this possible? Hadn't she been doing everything right? She felt the fruit habit suddenly collapse into something naive, childish, foolish. She pushed the bowl away. Her throat closed. The morning sun, once soft and golden, now felt harsh, exposing, mocking. And just like that, the doubt came crashing in. This is why people take medication, she thought. This is why fruit and hope don't matter. She didn't cry. Not right away. But a silence settled over her, the kind that felt like surrender. She didn't walk to the creek that day. She didn't read. She turned on the TV for background noise and stared blankly at a cooking show she didn't care about. And by dinner, the bowl of fruit was still there, untouched. That night, she couldn't sleep. The letter lay on her nightstand like a judgment. Around 2 a.m., she got up, made tea, and sat by the window, remembering her mother's voice, remembering the way she used to whisper, "The body listens, even when you don't see it working," Elaine scoffed. "Well, Mom," she muttered. "Maybe the body's too late," but then something strange happened. Her eyes drifted across the room to the notebook. Her mother's notebook. The one with the fruit list. She hadn't opened it in weeks. Slowly, cautiously, she walked over and untied the ribbon. Inside, tucked in the back, was a folded piece of paper she didn't remember noticing before. It was handwritten, not medical advice, not science. Just a single sentence. Even if the results take time, keep choosing the thing that gives you life. Elaine read it again, and her chest ached, because suddenly she realized this wasn't about fixing everything. It wasn't about numbers on a chart. It was about living each day with intention. feeding her body, not to fight disease, but to honor the life she still had. Tears came then, not from fear, but from release. Because all this time she'd been waiting for proof, for permission. But what she needed was faith that something small done with love over time could matter more than anything immediate or convenient. The next morning, she rose early. She sliced the orange with steady hands, peeled the kiwi, tossed a handful of blueberries into the bowl. She didn't know what the next test would say, but she knew this giving up wasn't medicine. And fruit, however simple, was a declaration. I'm still here. I'm still choosing life. There are turning points you don't recognize until long after they've passed. But this one, Elaine felt it the moment it happened. It was a Thursday morning. Nothing special on the calendar. The rain had finally stopped, and the sky held that pale Oregon blue she always loved. Elaine stood at the window stirring a bowl of oatmeal and slicing a banana, not out of obligation, but because it felt right. The bowl of fruit on the counter wasn't just part of her routine anymore. It was part of her identity, and something was shifting. She didn't wake up groggy anymore. Her joints still had their creaks, but there was movement, freer, easier. Her digestion had improved. Her cravings for heavy processed food had softened. Her skin looked less dull. But the biggest change, her mood. There was color in it now. Elaine found herself humming while folding laundry. She lingered longer in the garden, watching bees skim the lavender bushes. She walked down the block just to wave to a neighbor's dog. Her journal, once blank for weeks at a time, now had full pages again. Tiny observations, feelings, even questions she hadn't thought to ask in years. Why does my body feel younger when I stop trying to chase youth? The fruit wasn't a cure. It wasn't a miracle drug. It was something better. It was a ritual of connection. Each piece, the kiwi, the lou, the handful of berries, was a small act of reverence. Not to undo the past, not to delay aging, but to honor the living tissue of now. She was in every sense feeding the woman she still was. Elaine began looking back, not with regret, but with gratitude for all the things her body had carried her through grief, childbirth night shifts, surgeries. It had never asked much, only fuel and kindness. And maybe, just maybe, this daily fruit habit was her way of saying thank you. One evening, as the sun painted the porch in streaks of amber, she sat with a bowl of watermelon and blackberries and thought of her mother again. Ruth had died peacefully at 96. Her hands still strong, her voice still clear. Elaine had always assumed it was good genes, but now she wasn't so sure. Maybe it was good habits. Maybe it was trust in something quieter than medicine. Elaine began sharing the story, not through lectures, but through presence. Her friends at the senior center noticed the change. You seem lifted, one said, lighter. She smiled and replied, I started with fruit. I ended up with peace. She wasn't trying to convince anyone. She just lived, fully, simply. One night, she reread her mother's handwritten note again, even if the results take time. Keep choosing the thing that gives you life. And this time she added a line underneath in her own pen. I did. And I'm not done. By the time Elaine returned for her next checkup, nearly 3 months had passed since she started her fruit ritual. She walked into the clinic wearing her favorite olive green sweater and a light scarf. head-high posture, open, not because she had to, but because she could. The waiting room felt smaller than she remembered, or maybe she had grown larger, not in size, but in spirit. When Dr. Mira Patel stepped into the room with her chart, she looked up, blinked once, then smiled in quiet surprise. "Elaine," she said slowly, "you look well." Elaine smiled. "I feel well." They talked, ran the numbers, compared notes, blood pressure, normal blood sugar, stabilized cholesterol, down. No need for medication, not yet. Maybe not for a long time. The doctor leaned back in her chair, clearly intrigued. What changed? Elaine paused. She could have said it was the antioxidants, or the fiber, or the polyphenols she'd read about online, but instead she said something much simpler. Chose to feed myself life every single day, and my body remembered. Dr. Patel tilted her head. "That's not something I can prescribe." "No," Elaine agreed, "but it works." She left the office with more than just a clean bill of health. She left with clarity, a quiet knowing that aging wasn't a slow fade into irrelevance. It could be a return to purpose, to presence, to herself. At home that evening, she walked to the kitchen and prepared her bowl without thinking papaya, strawberries. One orange slice, a few pomegranate seeds. She took her time. There was no rush. This wasn't just a habit anymore. It was a form of prayer. As she ate, the sun began to set behind the ridge, lighting her window in a golden hue. Elaine closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Feeling, not thinking, not tracking, just being. Alive, capable, connected. She reached for her journal and wrote, "I didn't reverse aging. I stopped resisting it." And that made all the difference. Later that week, at the local senior community center, Elaine shared her story, not as a success tale, but as an invitation. She brought bowls of fruit for anyone willing to try. Not everyone did, but a few did. And a few more came the week after that. Because when someone sees a quiet joy blooming in you, they want to know where the roots are buried. And the truth, they were buried in a single, small choice, repeated with love, over time. So if you're watching this right now, wondering if something as simple as fruit could really change your health, your mood, your life, ask yourself this: what if you gave your body one more reason to trust you? Not a diet, not a demand, just one bowl of nature's oldest gift. Each morning, what might bloom in you 90 days from now? It's not about reversing the clock. It's about remembering who you still are. If this story moved you, don't just watch. Choose. Choose one fruit, one bowl, one day. Then come back tomorrow and do it again. Comment below, "I choose life today." Because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just 5 quiet bites at sunrise.